Episode 111, Hot Water History. Thursday night, Gary, what's going on?
Leap year day. Leap year day.
It is a weird feeling, just having a normal day, but
It's
this
usually not
is,
on the calendar.
yeah, just it only happens once every 4 years, but it's just an average day,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Did you do anything special?
Not a thing. Not a thing. How about you?
I left my job officially,
Hey, you
so
did.
that was a bit of a leap.
Yeah.
That
Take it.
doesn't ha- that
Oh,
that doesn't happen every day.
no.
So I'm excited to get starting on the new business. Day one. Day one's tomorrow.
Charlie
So
increased the quit rate. An
yeah,
old
right,
economic rubric. Yeah.
right.
Showing more in this robust economy, Charlie's adding to the level of confidence that laborers have to transition from one job to another.
Yeah. What did you think about the Kennedy Hall episode?
I liked it. I think Kennedy's just, you can listen to Kennedy talk all day, their vocal quality. And then I love his humor and his insights. I thought they were all very sound. He's not in Ancapistan yet with us, but n neither are we in Ancapistan. We can only aspire to be, but we know what it looked like. And
Yeah.
by the way, it's not Somalia. So
Yeah, I really enjoy listening to him speak.
was there a highlight for you?
I thought it was a really good segment. What makes Kennedy Hall annoyed? I think you did a really good job with the questions there.
Mm, good.
And yeah, I knew he was gonna have insight. I really liked, I was looking forward to what he was gonna say about Joe Rogan, and
Uh-huh.
he really delivered. He really delivered there.
Yeah, I don't know if I could listen to Joe Rogan again with any true sincerity or real concern about him or more attention to any profound point that he does or most likely does not make.
Yeah.
So, oh well. Speaking of people being on different podcasts and prominent ones, not as prominent as Joe Rogan, but pretty close. Dave Smith is airing his episode, or I should say, Candace Owens is airing her episode with Dave Smith. Talk about the ascendancy of Dave Smith. He's been on with Megyn Kelly. He's been on now with Candace Owens, and he's been on Rogan a ton, which I guess is the pinnacle of that. But to be with Candace Owens, it really shows and illustrates something about her move to the libertarian prong on the stool. She's been rather I think she's been taken aback by the hostility that has been aimed toward her or aimed more so back at her because of her attitude in opposition to the various wars, especially the war in Palestine. So and you have Ben Shapiro on the same network,
Mm.
and he's barking at her about stuff, and she has. I love when she just posted back Christ is King. That was just boss, just totally based on her part. So, man, it should be a thrilling episode to hear how
How did
about how
they?
they interact and where there's agreement and where Dave can, as he does so effectively with almost everyone, move people at least to begin to discern the essential and core characteristics of libertarian and anarcho-capitalistic thought.
How did they even make that work? Shapiro and Owens.
I don't know.
I know they've got like in little spats here and there, but they're so different.
Yes.
And
What do you mean we're different? What do you mean?
yeah,
We're not different. We're basically same people. We're human beings.
why do you? If you could break
That was my
down,
Ben Shapiro, by the way. It
yeah,
wasn't my Candace No Owens.
I got, yeah, I figured that one out. Why do you think Dave's so effective? Why do you think he's grown so much? Is it his delivery? Is it just he's saying he's not rewriting the wheel here and he's just a good deliverer of the message? Or is it something that he's doing on his end? Why do you think that he's grown so much this decade?
His comedic timing works well with explaining arguments. That would be the first quality I see, that he understands how to grab attention of an audience because he's done so well and successfully in comedy clubs and in comedy specials. So he knows how to time and, well, first grab an audience's or a listener's attention and then understands how to retain it to a punchline. And rather than it being a joke, oftentimes it's the punch of some really principled stand that would be efficacious in terms of promoting peace, justice, and liberty to people who are open to alternative ideas that are willing to at least stretch a little bit the Overton window. That would be the first characteristic that I noticed that is exceptional within him. The second is, and it's less overtly obvious, but as he'll describe himself, because he's always wanted to give full disclosure about his transition from being essentially a lefty and a progressive into Rothbardian, Misesian, Hoppian ideas, is that he's extremely well read. I mean, I don't know of another comedian nor of another 20 something who is embarking as he did on a new career and a profession as he was doing in his early and then mid 20s. And as he's going to open mics and nightclubs to really hone his skills and wares in the comedic scene in New York, he's also during the day, while he's not writing material, he's absorbing and reading voluminous tracts. He's reading David Friedman and he's reading Hans Hermann Hoppe, and he was really consuming all of this. He's reading Human Action by Ludwig von Mises. And as a result of that deep dive, he was able to come to these conclusions that were so, I'll use the word liberating for him. It was liberating for his mind because the ideologies that he had espoused and that he was immersed within, whether it be in Park Slope in Brooklyn or wherever he was in Manhattan as a comedian, didn't seem to be, they didn't function. They didn't produce the results that they were supposedly intended to produce or conclude with. And then the final thing is, and it's related to the second quality that I think is so apparent within Dave, and that is, and operative within Dave, and that is he has this absolute passion for the truth, and he sees that there's a kind of slavery to ignorance that he wanted to dispel for himself, and he did successfully. And I think he does so all of the time. I was going to use the word progressively, but I don't think it fits there. But he's constantly learning. And then once he seizes upon a point in argument that is, from his mind, incontrovertible and unassailable, and one that promotes the truth, peace, and justice, then he really is a great proponent and defender of it. So those are qualities that I find most outstanding in him. Not that they're not apparent in some of the great minds and contributors to whatever this is, the movement, the liberty sphere or liberation sphere. But because Tom Woods has them and Clint Russell has them, and I think James Delingpole has them in spades, and Malice has them in spades. But Dave is just the most out there, articulate, and I won't say learned, but definitely the best conveyor of those truths.
Is there anything you think the church can learn from Dave Smith?
The I suppose the most outstanding quality that he exhibits that the church has fallen short of, especially the hierarchy, I won't say the laity, but the hierarchy, is just audacity, just the willingness to be countercultural, to be different, to be not accepted in the venues you once were either comfortable in or familiar with. And whereas he has gigantic uh, gumption and a real spine. Our bishops are castrated and invertebrates, and a lot of their effeminate priests are with them. What do you think?
I think that there's something in the way that Dave, like you were saying, with the comedic timing,
Mm.
where he finds the perfect he makes the perfect punchline, but for a debate, you know?
Yeah,
So
you don't, the attention span of the average American, just the average viewer in the Anglosphere world, or even when he goes, as he did with Robbie on a comedic tour of Europe, so he's quite international, is pretty limited. And if you can hone your argument in such a way and then deliver that punch, I think Dave speaks a lot like Tom Woods writes. You know, where
mm,
Tom is very perspicacious and exacting and detailed, and his arguments are so complete and well constructed. And then it's as though there's this momentum building up into the end, and then you're thinking, oh, wait a second, there's a little bit of a lull, and then he punches you in the gut with this tremendously important and consequential point. And that you and another thing I think it helps, especially people who are of our mindset, whether they're down the rabbit hole with us in Delingpole or they're in the libertarian anarcho-capitalist world, or even dipping their toe into the waters of the black and the gold, is just this, uh, well, we can remember those lines. Oftentimes, when you're engaged in conversation with people who are just the least bit interested in liberty, are different ideals, and they are minority ideals and principles and notions, um, and doctrines for that matter. You only have so much time. You got to grab them, you got to hook them, and they do a fantastic job. All those individuals we mentioned, but specifically Dave Smith in doing so. He knows how to work a room, and he would know how to work an individual in terms of intellectual, and he's an excellent debater too. That should be said.
did you see the debate he was getting on Twitter about the libertarian argument between letting drug addicts in public schools?
Yeah, again, I'm not, I'm glad you brought that up because there's a really good Twitter account. Her name is Libertarian Mama, and she, did you follow her on Twitter, Charlie?
I don't follow anyone,
She's,
but
oh, I'm sorry.
I've
You're
never
too
seen
cool for
her.
that. So
Yeah.
anyway, she posted a really good thing with all this attention that's coming up with Dave going on Candace Owens' show. I'm gonna be a bit of a spoiler here. Ron Paul, the great Ron Paul, who, by the way, converted Dave Smith through the Giuliani moment in the 2008 debates. Or was that 2004 debates? I can't remember. Excuse me. Um, anyway, Ron Paul's going to be on with Tucker. So she said, the libertarian mama said, okay, libertarianism is trending. If we could, guys, just dial down the autism just a little bit. Just dial down the
She
autism.
said that?
Yeah. Or something. I'm paraphrasing, but she said, all right, let's try to be cool. But maybe I'm adding the dial down the autism. That's what I would write if I was on my account right now. And Dave's the opposite of that. That's what my point was, is that Dave's not autistic, right? So he's constantly combating the autism, which is this kind of thick libertarianism that always wants to apply the principle without any consideration of the intent of the moral and economic agent or actor, uh, no matter what the situation or circumstance either. So this debate about, again, a big debate within libertarianism is between open borders and closed borders. obviously what Dave's point is that in a utopian world of Ancapistan, we wouldn't have countries with governments, so therefore you'd have personal and private property. So in that circumstance, there'd be no borders outside of your personal property or the property with whom you voluntarily and consensually share with others. Okay. That that world doesn't exist yet. So in the meantime, working with the practicalities as they are, and given that it's an infringement upon the people's basic safety, again, a libertarian principle, that to allow anyone into the country unfettered, well, and unvetted, that allows for a peril that ought not to be present. Just as he brings up one could argue that he's arguing from the extremes, but again, that's another thing that Dave's very good at is as Ludwig von Mises advocates in Human Action, is we use as Austrian economists and thinkers a lot of thought experiments to draw out the points. Whether Mises is describing the law of diminishing return or something along those lines, he uses frequent, very accessible thought experiments, and Dave does that extraordinarily well. In fact, he does it on the fly, oftentimes in an impromptu way. Excuse me, I should hit the cough button. Forgive me for that. So, but yeah, what was I saying about thought experiments before I coughed? Oh, Dave's very good at thought
Dave's very good
experiments.
at, yeah.
And then I forgot my broader point, but yeah, oh yeah, well, the
You
thought
talked about
experiment. Oh yes,
Mises.
my thought experiment was, or he was talking about how you want the same principle applies if you go to from the border at a macrocosmic level to a microcosmic level. Well, since public schools or libraries are indeed public or governmental property, is it therefore okay for a 60-year-old crack addict to go and smoke or shoot heroin or whatever they're using in a public school or in a public library? And and endangering the inhabitants thereof? Of course not. No one would argue that, except of course the autistic libertarian among us. So
Yeah, it was a pretty remarkable. It looks like controlled opposition to me.
sure.
Whenever something like that comes up, it just
Sure.
seems like, okay, this libertarian thing's picking up some momentum, so we
Right.
need to put in some
Here
bad
comes the autism, that's
some bad actors to
yes.
pretend that most of us are looking to live in a world where drug addicts are allowed in public schools.
Right.
So
And that's the same effect that the sex worker movement glomming onto libertarianism does, or Vermin Supreme wearing his boot on his head. You know, these sort of things are embarrassments and they really diminish the message and its attraction that it could have to people who are waking up to the corruption and inherent evil within the system.
do you remember the sex worker stuff at Freedom Fest?
Oh God, it was just so over the top. I think you and I would just kept rolling our eyes at and the vapid nature of it. It's like, well, are we supposed to be that this is not libertinism? Are we supposed to be applauding the fact that these women are up there? I'm sure their fathers are just overjoyed, you know, talking about,
It was so bizarre,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, talking
People
about
just,
all these boomer cons,
you're right.
and they're like, I'll go give you a head job right now. Okay.
These
How
60, yeah, these like 65-year-old,
you got a problem with that, sir?
these 65-year-old Republicans who think they're libertarian
Yeah. Like,
and them
and-
talking about that.
right. And the fact that we were there in, what was that, 2021?
Right.
And there were a couple bigger issues that should have been the focus of any panel in 2021 because we had to go to South Dakota to actually
Yeah.
not be prescribed by law to wear a mask or not gather. And then, of course, we have this, what must be well, let's a marginal concern, and that is whether people should be able to engage in sexual activity for remuneration.
We talk about COVID. Can
Okay, go ahead.
we just shake our heads?
What about COVID?
Let's just, I think we should just shake our heads,
Just go, just like,
just at everything.
uh-huh.
Don't you ever do that once in a while? I do that. I just look
Did you
back, I just
did
take
you like
it.
on my post that I asserted that Alexei Navalny died of the clot shot?
Okay. I want to talk about the newest post because Rich had reached back on this one and
Hmm.
you brought the fastball. First of all, it was great because I mean it was just hilarious to look back at December 8th, 2021.
Uh-huh. So you want to
And
provide the context here
yeah,
to the
I will.
audience?
Sorry, I was just flipping through it. To Russia with love, an open letter to Vladimir Putin.
So that was the old article that I posted within the new post for today.
Do you want to summarize that? Because if someone's hearing that for the first time, they might not.
Oh, sure. This is 3 months before the actual invasion, and I tried to, in the most charitable of ways, express my love and affection for the Russian people and Russian culture, and also take more than a few swipes at our American political class and people like Victoria Nuland and her rat bastard husband and all the neocons like Samantha Power who brought this conflict and NATO literally, I should say figuratively, to the Russian doorstep. And the propaganda that was flowing back then that was already this warmongering footing that the Biden administration and who's ever running, Joe Biden, were putting into place. And the propaganda was just overwhelming, and the yellow press was just ubiquitous at the time. So I've been making fun of that. And then at the end, if you think I was being too flowery or almost acquiescing too much to the dictator, I hope Vladimir Putin was able to read it. He reads English, he speaks English. But if he ever reached his desk in the Kremlin, I don't know if he'd be happy with the end because I reassert that I'm not a fan of his because I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so I'm a fan of no head of state. So I hope that the Russian state crumbles. I hope it crumbles way down the list of states, but I hope it eventually crumbles and that people can live truly free without the larceny, the legal plunder that is the state. And then today I kind of was reminiscing about how I called that one out pretty well. I mean, Robbie and Dave always talk about on Part of the Problem how they're able to figure things out and they have a really great track record going back to, ironically, Russiagate and what was going on within COVID and the like. They were excellent on almost everything, and they were right in deciphering and diagnosing what was coming up as the corporate and government media, same thing, was projecting what was going to happen and providing a kind of background for making people acquiesce and be passive to what was about to transpire. But yeah, we have a really good record there, and it's all chronicled. That's the beauty of having a website is and a personal and professional website where my writing is that you can just look back and it's all dated. So whether it's on COVID or it's on the impending, as this in this case, Russian war with Ukraine. So I was just looking back and thinking, wow, maybe. And James Delingpole had a great guest on, and he was talking about, well, maybe Putin's not a baddie. Maybe Putin's a goody. So I consider that.
My favorite line after you say, perhaps I can live on Edward Snowden Drive. I take full credit for rightly assessing the whole Russia thing well before the invasion to denazify and denatofy Excuse the repetition there, Ukraine.
I'm glad you like that, Charlie.
Yeah, far from Putler, to be sure.
Yeah, far from Putler. I have to give James Delingpole credit for the Putler thing. He made that up. So Pache James.
Yeah, the where does this all go? Because Tucker goes to Russia. He says everything's nicer there, or not everything, but the train station there would be the number one nicest train station in the United States.
By a long margin, by a significant margin in spread. Yeah.
Imagine, imagine Tucker going to the L after going to that train station in Moscow.
I mean, what is this? I would never find this in Russia. Right?
That was pretty good.
Thanks.
That was pretty good. Where he just doesn't talk with his neck at all, or he like he goes into his shell.
What does that mean? Yeah.
That's
That's a
pretty
boy.
good. That's
Thanks.
pretty good.
Um, yeah,
I
well,
was saying, where does this go? I was saying, is the West just dead? Is it
I told you
just,
it's in hospice. Yeah.
so it's not dead yet?
It's in hospice, but no one's telling it
Yeah,
except one guy. The one guy who's riding around outside the hospital or the hospice center, right, with his shirt off, riding a horse and saying that we don't have to participate in your Federal Reserve currency debacle system, right?
yeah.
So that's why he draws their ire. And look historically, every dictator that was even once allied with the United States, from Gaddafi to Saddam Hussein, even to an extent Osama bin Laden, right? Once they start recognizing that their support, or more so their allegiance with the United States, is dependent upon them carrying out entirely what the CIA wishes within their sphere of control, and then they reject that, well, then they become enemy number one, or number two, or number three, and then they're on the CIA and Pentagon hit list for nation state regime change and takeover. And Putin, well, you might wonder, well, why was there no real hostility? Although there were hostilities, they weren't just very public between Russia and the United States in the years, I certainly after the fall of the Soviet Union, and then ultimately when Putin came to power in late 1990s and early 2000s. Well, because he was essentially extending an olive branch to NATO and the West and wanted to enter into international markets and sell Russian oil and gas to whoever was the highest bidder. There was no animosity, although there could have been, given what the United States and Britain and France and Germany were aiming to do in Russia, and then all of the promises broken, especially with the expansion of NATO. I mean, the idea that, I mean, you don't remember this because you were a wee Charlie, but way back in at the end of the Bush administration, actually, I want to say it was a couple years before George W. Bush left office, they started putting, that is to say, the Pentagon, putting long-range ballistic missiles systems into Poland and Romania.
Whoa.
And when the Russians said, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" First of all, you already said you weren't going to make these countries NATO countries, and you've done that. Now you're putting forward advancing offensive weapons into these countries right on our doorstep. And you know what the excuse was? The Bush administration said that it was to defend against an attack from Iran. More than what, 1,500, 2,000 miles away? So none of it made sense. None of it made sense, except, of course, I think it was loud and clear to the people who are operating behind the scenes that this is just an aggressive move trying to envelop Russia in hostile powers.
Yeah, it is pretty remarkable, and we talked about this before, but just if another country was doing what we do to other countries,
Right.
they would be melted.
That's not a counterfactual, right? I mean, you could, as I did before, point to all of the catastrophic regime change wars. Once once Saddam Hussein starts to talk about going from off the petrodollar system and abandoning the oil for food program and starts trading Iraqi oil in euros or accepting yuan, that's when all of a sudden we're going to have Iraq War 2, right? Or when Gaddafi resurrects Libya from a third world nation. I mean, do you realize that Beyonce and all these stars had played in Tripoli prior to Gaddafi's being toppled by Hillary Clinton and her lizard ilk? I mean, there were I think Jay-Z went there. I think there were huge acts, and they were people who were just marveling at the beauty of Tripoli and like how everything was ordered and clean in Libya. And now it's a failed state. We kind of like those because they all fail. But this was like an absent state, and chattel slavery is back. So thanks, United States. And this, by the way, isn't in anywhere in our proximity. Now, going back to this is in the counterfactual where the threat is on our doorstep. Think about how the world was brought to the brink of nuclear cataclysm, if you believe that nuclear weapons exist. That's you can go into that rabbit hole. But um, the nuclear cataclysm and World War III, because the Soviets had dared put an arm nuclear or warheads in Cuba, right?
Right, right.
So all of this is obscene.
You know, I don't feel too white pilled today. I'm not gonna
Really?
lie.
I kind of am. I don't know why. You're starting a new job, new venture.
Oh,
Maybe it's exciting.
personally I feel white pilled.
Just the world around you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I try to not pay as much attention as as I would if podcasting about it was my full-time job, you know.
Yeah, and there are some ominous economic signs. Peter St. Onge is pointing out all of
He's
these
awesome.
like consumer confidence levels hit just a cataclysmic low, down 3.8% in 1 month. Um, I think businesses, especially leveraged businesses and very indebted smaller businesses, are really going to get hit here soon. Um, as to how much that's going to impact the economy, I think you're just going to see some more consolidation and even the markets continue to roar higher just because you don't have that kind of competition in the market. And inflation's fueling all of this too. So a lot of distortions, and that inverted yield curve is it can't stay there that way for long without recession, in my opinion. So delving into some finance and economics there.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear more. With inflation, I guess I don't really, is there, I don't understand because I know we printed a certain amount of dollars, right?
7 trillion.
Right.
Mhm.
So is there a rate at which they're controlling that or they're predicting how that's going to go?
Are you talking about yield curve control? Where they,
No, I'm just talking about consumer prices.
oh, is there a limit that
Yeah,
the market
like,
determines that?
okay, yeah, but is there like a projection on,
Oh, you'll hear, I mean, everybody was projecting, uh, whether you talk to the Fed and you're talking about Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen or Paul Krugman, or if you're talking to Bob Murphy and Peter Schiff, you're going to get different, and Peter St. Onge, you're going to get different, and even Gene Epstein on our side, to name drop just one more person, you're going to get conflicting reports about that. I mean, Bob Murphy was very clear that he thought a recession, a deep one, was going to come in 2016, and that didn't happen. So, and the way that he thought the hyperinflation was going to come after the quantitative easing in 2009, 2010, 2011, and inflation remained relatively low. So, yeah, one could argue that we're in an inflationary cycle and that the ramifications of what happened in 2008 and has just are still being felt. And then you just added gasoline to the fire when you pump in $7 trillion without any actual production backing it or evaluation behind it other than the legal tender laws. So um, it's hard to say. All we know is that this is not transitory. Everybody is because everyone wants to be bullish because they have to beat inflation in their hedge funds and their passive pension funds and stuff like that. And those managers, they're all they want to see the stock market continue to go up, so they want to hear the bullish stuff.
Yeah.
So everybody says, well, where's the inflation's kind of moderating? It's moderating. It's still going up from its, you know, very consequential and important highs.
Right.
So until we see deflation and deflation, now kind of healthy in deflation, there's not going to be a real remedy to the consumer.
Is there a healthy deflation? Or
Oh yeah.
would that be
Uh, I would almost argue almost all deflation is healthy. Almost all deflation is healthy. Unless you have deflation because people are producing absolute shit, so no one wants to purchase anything.
even if people are in debt, even if a ton of people are in debt?
Well, again, you people who are in debt, well, again, we have to look at the cause here. Are they in debt because of their own malfeasance and poor decisions, or are they in debt because of as an 18-year-old they were fooled into believing that getting a 4-year sociology degree from Tulane was going to net them some sort of marvelous six-figure job and that they'd be able to pay off their $400,000 in student debt. I feel bad for those people, but you're not going to remedy the system by, doing the William Jennings Bryan thing and constantly pumping more fiat into the system. I mean, that's what everybody like to say. Oh, well, it's a lot easier to pay off the debt, of course, if you have exploding inflationary rates and a devaluation of the currency. True, but then again, it's going to be $45 for a chicken sandwich. So,
Right. No,
are you
I'm
really
with you.
making yourself? Are you really coming out ahead?
Yeah,
And you can't live in a house. You got to stay with your parents and beg you can use the bathroom once in a while.
I wanted to hear what you had to say to that argument. You want to go to a town that we're not so bullish on?
I never have been, never will be. I'm always bearish on Oak Park.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Meanwhile, in Oak Park, this is the first of these types of stories that I've heard so far. Oak Park couple hosts GoFundMe to house a migrant family.
Oh, God. They're stepping up, Charlie.
No one can fix it all, says Kathy Angel, but just to do one concrete thing. Kathy Angel and her husband Jim had been keeping up with the news coverage of the migrant crisis in Chicago. On January 11th, news organizations such as ABC7 and the Chicago Tribune were writing of migrants waiting in the landing zone and using warming buses. They knew they had to do something. Quote, I pulled together jackets and sandwiches and went to the buses just to do something, and I did it again outside the shelters, Kathy Angel said. Kathy Angel identifies herself as a grandchild of Italian immigrants. She remembers the stories her grandfather would tell her as she was growing up. Seeing and reading about the desperation in today's buses and shelter places, the Angels said they, quote, just felt called to help. Kathy Angel says, quote, my husband and I, we just don't care about the politics of it all. We understand that there's all different points of view, but what we're seeing are people that are already here. They began looking at fundraising and researching online about crowdfunding campaigns and how to ensure success. Starting their GoFundMe, the Angels seek to raise $15,000 to help house a migrant family. However, the Angels knew that they needed to partner with an organization that had the means to use the money they would raise. They knew Reverend Morello, a leader of the Catholic parishes of Oak Park Migrant Ministry, and the Angels chose that organization to administer the money.
I thought, what? Why don't they just let them in their home? Forget the GoFundMe.
I don't know. Costs money to host.
Get it?
I actually think this is on the how much does this annoy me so far? I think it's pretty cool that they're actually.
Sure, it's a 1 on my. I don't like the
I think it's pretty honorable,
I
actually.
don't like the sloppy comparison to the immigration patterns of old, which were entirely different. It's a totally different situation.
Oh yeah, right. But I actually think it's pretty honorable. You know, no one in Naperville stepped up to actually, put their own house on the line. The
Sign up
Angels,
list.
the Angels are actually putting their house on the line here.
Are they? I thought they were just having the money go to St. Edmunds.
Yeah, but they're still going to be living their household on the line. They're gonna have a rent. They're gonna have a guest in their house.
Oh, okay. I didn't get that part.
Let's see. I might be wrong. Gene
Okay.
Meister, communications coordinator for Migrant Ministry and for Oak Park Family Traditional Shelter, said that Migrant Ministry began last July, opening up a little used rectory to provide a space for migrants. They began by offering showers twice a week. Then they distributed clothes and provided childcare so parents could meet with caseworkers. However, the number of migrants they were assisting grew. Quote, we realized this need was going to last for a long time and we started to look for a new location. That location was the empty St. Edmund's School. How many
Yeah.
more Catholic schools are they going to shut down over this?
Oh, a few. They got more migrants. Perfect. The grift is on, as I stated, or we talked about with Kennedy last episode and last week. It's amazing the synergy of all these Catholic institutions closing just so these migrants can be shuffled in, and then the local government could give to the local bishop and ordinary money in governmental contracts. It's quite the money laundering scheme, isn't it? Talk about placement and layering and integration. It's all right there. And they're not at all worried about it.
It's through that what you just said makes my blood boil.
Mm,
Through working with the village, they were able to open the Oak Park Family Transitional Center, the Oak Park Family Transitional Center. Meister said that moving migrants in is the next step, which they plan to do next Tuesday. The shelter will last until June 30th. Migrant Ministry and the Oak Park Transitional Shelter seek to support the transition of the migrants from hotel rooms to apartments. Quote, we have a great deal of trust in them, Angel said. We know that they'll be great stewards of the money everyone donated. The Angels do not know the family that their fundraising will help. The chosen family depends on what families are in the position to be helped and on finding available apartments. The Angels were even discussing updating their GoFundMe page to reflect the possibility that the family the donations help may not be from the original migrant group. After finishing the GoFundMe campaign, Kathy Angel said she will focus on more hands-on work and volunteering. She added that she hopes that Migrant Ministry and other organizations across the city will receive more attention and recognition. Quote, there are so many organizations that are helping, and I think people need to hear that because what people usually see are the negatives, Angel said.
what exactly are the positives, though?
So it's not their own home.
No.
They're they're covering rent for
Yeah.
another migrant family.
And by the way that they're funding all of the housing and board and all things, that 15,000 is going to last what? About 5 minutes?
I mean, yeah. I don't know what happens when there's no more money.
Right. Well, remember Hans Hermann Hoppe's great solution to all of this regarding immigration is just that people emigrating find a sponsor, and then the sponsor is responsible for that immigrant. And if they're both working toward having them become productive inhabitants of the country, then it's a much simpler transition into even naturalization and citizenship, right? But when the government is the only sponsor and the angels, in this case, the family is gonna kick in a little bit, a minuscule amount compared to the expenditure, pretty evident what's going on. Someone posted, I saw on, I don't know if it was on Twitter or just on a text chain, that some absurd multiplier is the number of illegal immigrants that have come into the country since Joe Biden took office. It's like 4 or 5 times the size of the entire US military. Yeah, it's absurd. It might be 10 times.
Let's get to the next story. Last one.
Hmm.
Public lashes out at Oak Park Library over management of Palestinian culture event. Many are criticizing the library for mishandling the event and eliminating at least one DEI position. The leadership of Oak Park Public Library is under fire from former staff and community members over their handling of an event celebrating Palestinian culture and the elimination of 2 community engagement staff positions. They accuse some members of the leadership team of treating the event differently from similar ones held at the library in the past, and question whether the motivations were racist and reactionary as the Israel-Hamas war heads deep into its 5th month. Quote, "We want the Oak Park Public Library back," said Rebecca Levin, the first public commenter of the evening, the one that had been transforming for many years into one that was far more inclusive and embracing of diversity.
Uh-oh.
At the
Wait,
OPP,
is this Levin woman against the Palestinian night or in favor of it? I guess we'll have to see.
I have a feeling from what I just read against.
Oh, she's not so much in favor of diversity now, huh?
Against that.
Yeah.
At the OPPL's board meeting Tuesday, roughly 30 community members submitted public comments or spoke to protest the library's practices regarding the 2 events. The first incident involves an event at the library. Oak Park Neighbors for Justice and Peace in Palestine and Israel and the Oak Park River Forest Middle Eastern North African Student Alliance hosted a January 21st event celebrating Palestinian culture that was attended by more than 400 people.
Huh. Sounds kind of nice. I wish we were invited.
That's a party.
Yeah.
Its designation as a community rather than a library event confused critics. Typically, a community event like this one is hosted and planned by the outside group and is not advertised by the library, said the library's executive director. Library events, on the other hand, are collaborative, meaning the library would have a hand in planning and advertising. Staff do not have the capacity to do that for every program, Dixon said. In this case, the library liaison for the event, Quanta Griffin, the multicultural learning coordinator, told Dixon that this event was not a library program, Dixon said.
What the hell, man? What does this matter?
This article is so long, by the way. I'm not reading all of this.
God. It's got to be very nuanced, Charlie. A lot of sensitive matters being approached or being broached.
It's, let me just quote this. I kind of want to read a lot of this now, actually.
Uh,
It's time for Oak Park to stop putting Black women, especially, in positions of power and thinking we've solved racism, Griffin said. Ooh, I
Wow.
like that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get Griffin's first name.
Ravi Griffin.
Oh, Juanta Griffin.
Wanta.
If I was there, this is Juanta, quote, if I was there, it would have never gone off the calendar.
Mm.
So the group organizing the event through the library was indeed a co-sponsor. Commenter said once the Palestinian culture event was specified as a community program, commenters said the event was taken off of the library calendar and denied promotion on its social media platforms.
Oh boy.
So it sounds like Rebecca was for it sounds like the library shut this down
Okay. Okay.
and that Rebecca was originally for this.
Good for you, Rebecca.
Griffin said she's tried to kill ignorance and racism in the community and help build relationships with people. She said she did the same work she did for any other group. And when she came back from medical leave, everything had changed.
Medical leave for 8 years. She has the Oak Park Hospital getting all those new beds that corrupt guy was contracting out.
This is pretty interesting. Wednesday Journal had reached out to staff members for comment, but Dixon said that if other staff were speaking to the news media, quote, they really should not be, and that, quote, they really aren't authorized to, citing the library's communication policy.
Oh God.
Here's our
Look what
library's current media practice. The executive director serves as the official library spokesperson and conveys the official library position on issues of general library-wide significance or situations that are of a particular controversial or sensitive nature.
well, all of this is making me want to put a jihad on the Oak Park Library system. Is that appropriate?
On
Or
Wednesday, Griffin gave the journal permission to include her comments, but said her remarks are her opinion and she is not representing the library. She said it was, quote, bullying to not be able to speak out.
this is so
Another
Jewish.
another commenter, Dima Ali, said that as an Arab American woman, the library's actions made her feel unsafe. Quote, "We are not terrorists," Ali said. I am ready to challenge the racists in the community."
Now, Miss Ali, just a communication point. Your main argument shouldn't start with "we're not terrorists." It's not a great selling point. It's like going up to a car dealer and say, "I'm not a crook, but I'm going to sell you this car."
So we don't know if the Wednesday Journal is doing that or if Ali's doing that too.
Well,
Like
then the Wednesday Journal's being terribly racist.
I'm saying maybe she said that in the speech. You never know
Right.
what gets, how the order of that goes, but
Yeah.
there's a big Facebook post followed by another big Facebook post. I can't believe we're spending energy here,
Yeah.
you know?
But this is Oak Park, where energy is expended for no particular purpose.
And I don't even listen to this. Sorry. Okay, so this is the real story. Two positions, including Swansea's, were recently eliminated. This is at the library, so it's like a sub story after this.
Okay.
Swansea, who served as the restorative practices coordinator on the community engagement team,
Oh God.
said she feels the community engagement team was targeted by the library's leadership. Swansea added that leadership told her she would be able to continue her DEI work in the new role, but she said she felt most of her position would change and was disheartened by the communication. Quote, "My role was one of the few at the library that was explicitly dedicated to amplifying marginalized voices and modeling anti-racism and equity." Dixon acknowledged that two positions were eliminated and said it was because of budget constraints. It was not a reaction to the January 21st event, she said. The two community engagement team members were offered an opportunity to move laterally to another open position, and to split responsibilities for that role. One accepted, and Swansea declined the offer. The library, believe it or not, Gary, is operating on a deficit.
Oh, get out of town.
Can you believe that?
With all the fiscal responsibility in
I
Oak Park.
totally would have thought that they were raking it in on a surplus just because of how efficient they are. Spending about $500,000 too much each year, Dixon said.
Ooh. Dick's inside him.
Next year, no reserves will be left if they continue that pattern. So the library has to find ways to cut costs, she added. Quote, "It's not personal, it's just business," she said. "It's happened to everyone."
Oh.
Further, the entire library staff should be working toward anti-racism and equity initiatives, Dixon said, rather than having just one position dedicated to it. Quote, "If the library actually believes this, then this is only more proof that they need more DEI training," Swansea said.
Yeah, I gotta get more. Whenever the problem's unsolved, it just means more. More sanctions on Russia, more DEI training in Oak Park, more communism in New York City.
The previous deputy director of the library, Jim Madigan, said library communications need to be mutually respectful. Several other commenters said library staff do not feel safe to share their concerns about equity and leadership and are concerned about censorship.
That'd be great if she began a letter like "Dear Honky."
Yeah. Quote, "It is time for leadership that leads and not divides," one commenter said.
Ooh.
Library leadership plans to listen to community concerns, Dixon said, and work to reduce misinformation. Quote, "That's," and referring to the public comment, "that's a great thing about democracy," she said.
Oh.
If you're not doing something that bothers someone, you're not doing much."
The level of stupidity in these people is bothering me.
Let me read that
They're
again.
doing a lot. Why does every article in the Oak or whatever, the Wednesday Journal, end with a cliche?
They do. It's
Because
like
Oak Park is the town of cliches. It's
the
just a big
editor,
cliche.
the editor there has, if you don't fire a quote at the end, it's like, get
A
out.
cliche. It's just a
That's
that's
a
statement.
that's a great thing about democracy, she said. If you're not doing something that bothers someone, you're not doing much. Do you think anyone in the crowd really nodded their head to that? How many
I think
nods?
a lot of them did. I think a lot of them did.
How many nods did that get?
I'd say 80%.
If you're not doing something that bothers someone, you're not doing much.
And that 20% that didn't do the head nod, they were the ones that were targeted.
What does that have to do about,
Sounding
what does that
stupid.
have to do with democracy? Do they know what democracy is?
No.
It's just a majority rule.
Democracy is whatever they subjectively conjure up in the DEI department. That's their idea of democracy.
It really is the God of our times when, it makes me think about the Bible story about how from the gospel talking about three divided by two in households. It's
Mhm.
very much that same tone that if you got a choice to make here,
Yeah.
you're either with us or you're not.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, this is these people's God.
Sure is. Sure is.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
That's all I got. That's Meanwhile
Well,
in Oak Park.
that was a good Meanwhile in Oak Park. That was a good one. I like that one.
Yeah, it's good when you get into the social arguments. It's fun to picture being in the Oak Park Library when all of this stuff is happening.
Said
I
no one
mean,
ever, but we've
this
said it.
is people's day-to-day job.
This is their, yeah.
Like this is the office drama they have to deal with, is being aired out to the Wednesday Journal.
Yes.
And
And
people
I'm
being
sure
people being
they're just,
criticized for racist,
yeah, they're
for being
anxious to the
racist.
hilts. Anxiety. They're suffering panic attacks over this, I'm sure. Right? All of these absolutely conjured up jobs because of the love affair that government has with amorphous causes, right? More on racism, more on classism, more on ableism, all this stuff that will never be defeated because they're attitudinal by nature, right? So you just got to throw more money and more people into it. And then those people get to justify the cause because their whole professional life is wrapped up around it. That's the real cancer of all these DEI departments, whether they be in corporate America or in a suburban library, is that what would be the and one could argue the logical deduction that one would have when all of these departments as they are now because they're so expensive and Ibrahim Kindi's got to cut his uh intersectional anti-racism department at Yale or wherever he is down by 40%. Well, it's just because there's all these white supremacists out there. It's MAGA. And then therefore they become even more enraged because their career in um, grievance peddling is has gone by the wayside. So they're a perfect government lackey class.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, thanks for everybody for listening, and I had an enjoyable time. Charlie, I had an enjoyable time talking about all things going on in our world, historical, economic, and Oak Park.
It is a
And
crazy time to be alive.
it
I
absolutely
feel
is.
like we say that that's kind of the conclusion of every
It's a
episode.
crazy time to be alive. Yeah, but it's a good one. It's entertaining too. There's some great people out there still. Speaking of great people, support our sponsor, the Alcorns and Trinity Brewing. Buy me a beer. I think I have that's means by which people could support the show is just really unfortunately dried up. So please, what the old Stein here and buy me a lot of beer.
Anything else?
That's it from my end.
All right, everyone.
Peace.
Appreciate it. Peace out.